Welcome to this episode of Security Market Watch, the show that goes straight to the source for market insights. And today we are with the man, the myth, the legend, Richard Stiennon. Richard, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Josh. Thank you very much.
Well, this isn't our first rodeo. We've done this before, and we were on Cyber Chomps. And I encourage anybody to go dig through the archives, wade through the internet, and look for Cyber Chomps, and you'll find a conversation that we had just after you had published Security Yearbook 2022.
Right, yeah.
And I keep checking on Amazon for Security Yearbook 2023. Number one, it's not on Amazon, but I keep forgetting it's on your website. So I'd go to Amazon, I'd look for it, and then I'm like, no, it's on the website.
And right here.
Yes. And right there, you've got the entire. So I noticed that as soon as we popped on. Yes. And so is that all 2023, or do you have some 2022, 2021, 2020 mixed in?
It's all 2023 there. The 2022s are on the floor over there and in boxes. And at the warehouse. The warehouse is where they're all stored. So, but I have to clear all of them out because I basically sold the rights to next year's edition to Wiley. Not sold.
Okay.
I just turned it over to them. And as part of that, I have to agree to stop selling all the previous editions. So by April 30th, you won't be able to get the historical editions. So,
well, I've got a copy, and I think did you sign it? You sent it to me. I don't think you signed it, but I need to get it signed.
Yeah, definitely. Next time I'm in Minneapolis, right?
Yes. Yep. Well, let me know, because I would like my signed copy. It'll be worth millions in the future.
That's for sure, man. Very few of them signed.
Yeah. Well, you've been really busy with ITHarvest, not just Security Yearbook 2023, which I really want to dig into. But let's get an update. I see you on LinkedIn, but I don't think that we've thoroughly caught up. So can you catch me up? Can you catch our audience up? What's going on with ITHarvest? First of all, what is ITHarvest? Where are you now?
Sure. ITHarvest is an independent industry analyst firm. I created it back in 2005 after I discovered that I shouldn't have left Gartner because I really enjoy being an industry analyst. And it turns out, after several attempts at being an executive at security companies, that's really all I'm cut out for, right? I'm not a good employee, but I'm good at being an industry analyst. So I created ITHarvest to allow me to research companies and do public speaking and writing, all the things I like to do. And I've been doing that for 17 years. Last year, after publishing the third edition of Security Yearbook, I realized the data was in good enough shape that we could publish it online and make it available as a subscription. And that kind of was the beginning of this concept of a data-driven analyst firm. And what ITHarvest is, but it's growing into it too, is an analyst firm, much like a Gartner, where you can get advisory services from an industry analyst. But there's only one of us. There's me, instead of the 54 that Gartner has, or 12 or so at Omdia, and Forrester and the rest. So, but I've got more experience than all the other industry analysts. I've been doing it longer as an industry analyst. And instead of just research reports, which of course, I can produce them, but I can't produce that much content. Instead of the research reports, I give you a tool to do your own research. And I think I'm hoping this is the future of industry analysis, is give people the tools, apply, modern technology, AI and all the rest, to derive those insights for you so that you can get your own insights. You don't have to rely on, I won't use the term ivory tower industry analyst, because Marcus Random used to call me that. And it's not true, right? As industry analysts have a lot of great insights, but they can only have so many insights. And you take all the data in one place and you flip it around and look at it from a different view, you get different insights. So
Mm-hmm.
with a platform, you could have unique insights, not ones that are shared with all the other subscribers to a Gartner.
Sure. And for this show, you are perfect. You are the perfect guest for this show because what we do here at Security Market Watch is try to help people cut through the noise. There's so many vendors. And I really want to get into that. There's a question here that I posed on LinkedIn. Is the cybersecurity market too fragmented? And most people, granted, only 5 people replied,
Yeah.
but 5 people voted. But 4 out of 5, I can say in a recent poll, 4 out of 5 people said that the security market is too fragmented. And so the approach that you've taken with ITHarvest is brilliant because it's near and dear to something, it is something near and dear to my heart. And so having you on this show is sort of, I'm going to call it an endorsement, even though you haven't explicitly endorsed it, because what we're trying to do is...
Yeah. No, hey, we'll easily endorse it. Come on. It's, you have great guests and great content.
Thank you. Because what we try to do is sort of what you're also trying to do with technology, we're trying to do with media. But instead of going for tons and tons of data, which you have your database is probably the most comprehensive database on the planet of security vendors. And so, what we try to do, we don't have that much data, but what we can do is have really good conversations with vendors, with CEOs, with CISOs, and help security leaders basically cut through the noise, which is essentially what an analyst does.
Yep, totally. Yeah, I see I think for the end user space, CISOs and on down, there's frustration because it feels like there are an infinite number of vendors and it's too confusing to understand them all. And I totally get that. I mean, I agree it's confusing. It's my full-time job to not be confused, but yet I'm still confused. The vendors in their chase for to be heard tend to pile on new concepts like, hey, if everybody's really interested in this new shiny thing like zero trust, then that's what we are. And they end up all sounding the same, even though they got completely different tools and they can apply. It's like, what does that even mean? Why don't they just say right on their website, we use digital certificates embedded in your device for authentication, instead of we're passwordless. What does that mean? Right. And even that, you're not passwordless. You've got a digital certificate. That's a really, really long password. And it's based on the device you're on and you and all sorts of data, but it's still a long password. It could still be stolen.
Yeah. And, I think everybody's trying to differentiate themselves so much. And that's probably why the market's so fragmented, because with technology, you can take a patent and tweak it. And you can say, well, we deal with passwords this way, and then somebody else deals with it a slightly different way. And then they can. So is that the problem? Are we just creating fractals based on minute changes to patents?
Yeah, no. So what's causing this problem is real things that are the threat actors, right? So if everything held still, then we could see consolidation ultimately, and we'd have a set of solutions, and the winner would take all. But there's other things at play, and one is digital mercantilism, where all the countries are fighting for their own technology specializations. They want to have, security is now super important. So France and Germany and the UK all want to have their own security ecosystem. So they're encouraging investment. People do tend to buy local, right? There's a distrust ever since, Edward Snowden revealed that the NSA is basically listening to everything from everybody. There's a distrust of all U.S. technology. And the odd attempt by the U.S. government to sow distrust of Chinese companies for the very same reasons is there's blowback, right? Because if we shouldn't trust other companies, then why should we trust Cisco for our telecom gear? Why should we trust Microsoft for our desktop operating systems? Why should we trust Google and AWS for our cloud infrastructure. No, let's build our own. So there will constantly be this effort to build companies. And I see it going on in Germany now. It's like Germany is coming up on having more security companies than Israel. And France is far
Really?
behind. Yeah.
They weren't even on my radar. I always
Yep.
thought of, when I think cybersecurity, I think Israel, Ukraine, Russia, North Korea, China.
Yeah. Yep. But
And
for
Germany's
companies,
running.
Ukraine has only got a handful, and it's basically Israel and the United States, right? Israel's got just over a tenth that the United States has. So, but you still won't hear of German companies, right? Because German companies tend to serve German customers or DACH customers, so Germany, Switzerland, Austria. So that's that fragmentation that's there, and so that's fine. You need somebody to sort that out for you. If you're in the U.S., you probably don't need to buy German technology, but they might have something that you need to look at.
Yeah, but even locally, you need somebody who's going to help you sort through that, all that mess.
Yeah, it's like, this is what industry analysts are for. So call one up, just ask them.
Right.
They might not charge for the first call.
Yeah. Well, I hope that people would listen to this show and walk away going, okay, I know a little bit more about Ningio. I know a little bit more about Netlify. I know a little bit more about, you can go back and go through all the episodes. And maybe when you walk onto that floor in RSA, you don't just have a heart attack. Maybe, you walk in already knowing, okay, I heard a podcast for about, a half hour. I know a little bit about these guys. I'm going to go check them out.
Yep.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're trying to be.
It's just hard to do that with 3,582 vendors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was going to ask you how many there were, and I was going to ask for a ballpark, but you gave the precise number.
Yeah, that's the number we have in our database today.
Okay.
But we've got about 45 in our workflow I still have to categorize them. So that's my main job is to categorize the vendor, category and subcategory. We have 660 subcategories. And then the team, fills out all the data. We're adding to the data points we collect every week. It's amazing. Now we have, website visitors to the vendor's website. So you can track, kind of how's their brand doing, and basically how's their marketing team doing. We can watch some of this, add it to a health score. So you just kind of get a feel for, if it feels like there's a buzz about a Okta or a Wiz, you look at their web traffic, and sure enough, it's up 10% month over month. So that would reinforce that for you.
Well, Wiz is killing it.
Yeah, they really are.
They're doing so well.
Yep, they really are. Somebody just sent me an interview with Nir Zook at Palo Alto. And I'm sure he's looking at Wiz going, man, we got to watch out for these guys. So he pretends that the industry is consolidating and there's only going to be 5 big players at the end of the day. And I've heard that for 25 years, and it's never happened, right? We went from, there were 20 vendors when I got into it, and now there's 3,500.
Well, all the big players, if you were to put all the big players today, how much of the market do they account for, percentage-wise?
Yeah.
So like the Microsofts,
let's throw in Microsoft's
Cisco.
not a big player.
Oh, really?
No.
Who's the biggest player?
Well, the biggest standalone player is Palo Alto. No question, in revenue. Accenture is slightly bigger in revenue. And yet you never hear about them because that's their consulting services.
Right. Right. They're more services.
Yep. So, let's address Microsoft, right? So Microsoft's claims I think they're up to claiming they're $20 billion in revenue. That's just not the case, right? Microsoft never comes knocking on anybody's door and says, would you like to buy, some security, right? They certainly have a big business in Active Directory, which is the core of identity and access management. They do own that space and they do charge for it. All the rest, Windows Defender, that's just free. And you can't say because it's part of our contracts for endpoints that that share, it's just funny money to say that part of that is security business. So yeah, not a security company. And
What about their
it'd be
enterprise?
unjust.
Mm,
It would be unjust for the company who caused the security issue to all of a sudden see it as a major profit center. This is crazy.
yeah. We've got holes in our OS, but we've got Defender to protect you from the bad guys coming through the holes.
That's right. That's right.
What about their enterprise wing? Don't they sell a lot to businesses?
They sell a lot to businesses, but not in what we think of as enterprise, right? It's, you have to have Microsoft, right? So they set the terms. And maybe if you're a big enough company, you get to negotiate those terms. But otherwise, it's just like going to Salesforce. You're just signing up on their website. We need another license for Windows, and which of the licenses are we going to buy, and that's it. Take it or leave it. It's that's
right.
It's always funny when Microsoft, Google, Apple talk about getting into enterprise sales, and they don't know the first thing about it, right? They never have. They've always been consumer first, and they work their way into the enterprise through the consumer door, and totally ruining our IT infrastructure forever. And it's part of Microsoft's, right? That we used to have this great, diverse computing world, right? There were mainframes, there were, a dozen Linux, Unix-based workstations and servers. And Microsoft came along and just undersold all of them with Windows NT and displaced all these great, multitasking, multi-user operating systems for an operating system that can only do one thing. So you need to buy multiple copies of the operating system and run it in VMs in order to get the same capacity as the traditional Unix machine had.
Yeah, so going back to the fragmented market, actually before that, I have a question that's been buzzing around my head that I just want to get out of the way because it's a busy bee in my head. So when there's a new company, there's a new organization, a new vendor, how long does it take from that company being a thing, an entity, to being in the ITHarvest database?
Once we discover them, it takes 4 days. And that's, just the process that we have. To be discovered, they have to, they can reach out to me. That's the easiest way. Or any, if any of the 33,000 people I follow on Twitter have, that do a startup, then I know about that because I see it. Not Twitter, LinkedIn. They quite often reach out to me on Twitter first because I got the following, so I got all that. We'll find them as soon as they go to a conference anywhere in the world because we're checking all the conference websites and sucking down the vendor participants, checking the ones we don't have. But there are many, once a week I find a vendor that's been around for 3 or 4 years I never heard of.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So generally
they pivoted into security, right? All the data discovery companies and backup and recovery companies are all
under the radar.
Yeah, or they'd say, "Oh, we're anti-ransomware because we do backup." So I would have covered them before, but once they start messaging around it, then I do.
So do companies generally want to be a part of the database, or have you faced any resistance?
Oh, yeah, they do. They really want to be in the book, right? Because the database generates the book, and it's nice to have your name recorded for all history in a history book. So there's no resistance. The only resistance is when I categorize them somewhere that they don't think they are, right? So and so far the database is totally made up out of open source data. That the vendors have not contributed anything to it. So I don't have to deal with vendors lying to me as you do if if you're Gartner or something like that. You've got to filter all the stuff they tell you in these big spreadsheets to make sure that you understand when they're lying and when they're not. I don't have to do any of that.
Oh, I've never thought of that. That's a whole, man, that must take hours.
Hours, and you have to be kind of savvy, and
Yeah.
smell it, and then remember what they told you last time you talked to them, and ask them the same question.
Yeah.
And if they
What kind
should,
of things do they lie about? What do they,
oh,
they come to
I
you.
can give
You
you,
would think that they're trying to be.
yeah, I can give you an old example. So we were doing the Gartner Magic Quadrant for managed security services in North America, and we thought the biggest one was ISS, which was what eventually turned into IBM's managed services.
Mm.
So, and my question for each of them was how many, back then it was managing firewalls and IDS devices, so sensors,
Mhm.
right? So I would always ask them, how many devices under management do you have? First time I asked ISS that, the PR person I used to work with at the company that ISS bought, so I had a good relationship. So I just asked him, and he said 1,500 devices. And I go, wow, okay. And then he left, moved on somewhere, and a year later they had a new PR person, and I asked that person, and he said 1,100. And then the CTO quit and went to work for Gartner, a competitor, MSSP. So I went up to see them in Boston, and I told him that ISS was claiming 1,100. He says, "Oh, that's crazy. We never had more than 500." So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, this is a small community, and you can't get away with crap like that, right? Eventually, that kind of thing is going to come to bite you.
Right. So are those all billable hours when you're just going from this person to that person, trying to gather the truth? I feel like
No,
that
not at
should
all.
be.
It's just part of an analyst's job to do that, right?
Okay, so they're
Yeah.
not getting paid based on how many hours they build.
No,
Their bill.
not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's a great thing about the analyst firms. Industry analysts give you advice like a consultant does, but they don't. You just ask them if you're a subscriber, right? So you've already paid up front for the service, and you just ask them, should we do this? Should we do that? Well, the founder of Trend Micro once, back in 2001, every single vendor was creating their own firewall, and was in a meeting with his new marketing team out west, and he came into the room for 5 minutes, and he just said, I just want to know, should we have a firewall? And I said, hell no. And he said, looked at everybody in the room. He said, I told you so. And then he left. And they, whereas ISS had a firewall, and everybody created their own firewall eventually.
Yeah. Everybody in the market. It's like Oprah. You get a firewall. You get a firewall. Everybody gets a firewall.
Yep, exactly.
Oh man. Well, it's kind of interesting because you're now a vendor yourself. So is ITHarvest? Yeah, is ITHarvest in the book or in the database?
No,
do you keep tabs on yourself?
No, because so far I don't have a technology that I'm selling, right? So I'm not a security solution. If you pay me a bunch of money, I couldn't make you more secure, right? With my technology, which is a database. So we're more like a Dun & Bradstreet or Standard & Poor's or PitchBook for cybersecurity data.
Yes, I could see that. Great. Yeah, so even if you are a vendor, but even if you wanted to, you couldn't include yourself in the book of life, so as it were.
That's right. So maybe I could, because we have a new subscriber who is very, very interested in services. So over the years, I've always said it's just too big. I can't handle all the consulting firms out there. And the only reason I've got the PwCs and Capgeminis is they have MSSP businesses, so that we do cover those. So, but we agreed to kick off a project to capture all the security consulting companies in the world and track them in the same way as we track all the vendors. So that's
interesting.
Going to be really a demonstration of whether or not we can expand. Now we've got our processes in place. I mean, it took me, 4 or 5 years to get to the point where we know how many vendors are in the space, and we've got all this data on them, over 120 data points on each one. It's taken us that long, but now we'll see if I can add a whole new category in 3 months. So
Sure. So that would entail going from being a sort of database to, would you be comfortable calling it a consulting firm at that point if you're adding services onto it?
no. So what I meant was we are going to track the data on all of the services companies. So it
Got it.
doesn't
Okay.
change our model at all. Just expands it.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, I was thinking that you were offering services, not tracking.
Yeah, we're
okay.
not gonna offer services.
Okay. Good. So how many companies were added to 2023 from 2022?
The net was up by 400. So
Oh,
it went
wow.
from 2,800 to
So is that kind of a
3,200.
hockey stick sort of growth, do you think? Do you think this will be exponential, or
No.
is there going to be...
Yeah, it's going to flatten out. It has to, right? Because they're not they're not being created at the rate of 400 a year. I think if more closer to about 100 or 120 startups that are created every year. But it still takes can take up to 2 years to discover them after they've launched. So even if they have a website and a LinkedIn page, I might not find them.
Sure.
But once they get the first funding, then everybody knows about them. Once they show up at a conference, then we've got them.
Well, 400 ain't bad. I feel like it's going to hit critical mass at some point. If there is this huge collapse or collapse or what is the word? Let's just call it a collapse. A crunch, a big crunch. Sort of like the submarine. Too soon? Maybe too soon.
Very too soon.
Yeah, maybe too soon.
If you think about it, the opportunity for that leveling off was when the Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, and all of the venture backers started to withhold funds, right? Or at the very least, want everybody to stretch out their runways, stop spending, stop hiring, start firing people. There are quite a few that couldn't get any funding and ran out of money. We'll have a better feel for that coming up here. But there's just one company I was tracking today, and I had mentioned it. It came up in one of the searches I was demoing, and somebody said, I think that company's out of business. Sure enough, they had 80 employees, and they just shut the doors. And that's pretty drastic. And we're going to hear that story a lot more in coming months.
Really? So do you think that may support the crunch if there is a consolidation, if there's a point when all the big companies just gobble up everybody?
No, not going to happen, because big companies will suffer too. As a matter of fact, big companies fail very, very often. Look at Symantec, McAfee, CA. It just goes on and on. Those guys own the space 20 years ago. They were the big ones. They were consolidating the industry. They just totally failed to execute on that. Right? It's just now, mind you, the investors made money, the private equity made money, all the banks made money, but a lot of people got left, with less than they had.
Right. All right. So in the little bit of time that we have left, let's talk market trends.
Okay.
Right. This is Security Market Watch, and you're Richard Stiennon. So I have to ask, it's on everybody's mind. It's just eating us up. What is the new buzzword? What's the new thing? You mentioned zero trust, and I think zero trust was the last one, or maybe even risk is getting thrown around, but I feel like it's when you have a lot of hype and you can't live up to it, and risk is sort of having that experience. I think these days, everybody's talking about risk, trying to quantify risk. The insurance companies are talking about risk, and it's a very slippery thing. You can't nail it down. So if not risk, what is the new buzzword? What is the new thing that you think is way overhyped?
Way overhyped. Well, certainly artificial intelligence is way overhyped. No question. As applied to security. As applied to the broader world and the things it's going to do, not hyped enough, right? It's game changing. Our lives are going to change forever thanks to artificial intelligence. Just what we've seen so far, not the promise for what could happen. But I think the security concerns, or the concept that you have to start building security in before you can let your employees use ChatGPT, that's ridiculous. Just stupid. Doesn't work that way. You share information with Google today. You don't tell your employees not to Google the technology they're using or the help questions they have, right? It's Google knows everything about you already. OpenAI is an unknown element, but they just launched an enterprise license. It's going to have a contract that specifically says they will not use your data to train their models. If you're afraid of them using your data to train their models, as I am completely, right? We use AI, we use ChatGPT. We pass off all the companies to ChatGPT and ask it to extract information from the company's websites. It takes 3 or 4 different tools we got to put together. There's no way that I want OpenAI to know, the 3,500 cybersecurity companies and their categorizations, which I've done myself. I'm the only one who could do that.
Right.
If we said, hey, here's all the companies and their categorizations, then ChatGPT could eventually incorporate that in GPT-5. So we obfuscate the data. We say company MD5 hash here, give us all this information about it. And it comes back and gives us the information. We replace the MD5 hash with the real name, and we've got the data. So anybody can do that. That's the simplest thing in the world when you're using GPT. And there are some tools.
Is it scraping the internet, or is it? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But I did anyways.
It does not. It does not. But there are tools that are scraping the entire internet.
Okay. Because I was wondering if you're using ChatGPT, with the limitation, it only goes back to 2021. Is there a version that
up to 2021?
It goes up to 2021. Sorry. Right. So, are you looking for companies or information on companies up until then, and then beyond 2021 are using a different technique?
Yeah, so we don't ask ChatGPT to discover data for us. We've got another tool that does scrape the entire internet, and we ask them give us the entire content of the websites of 3,000 vendors in JSON. So it structures all the content of all the websites. Now we've got JSON blobs, which we pass to ChatGPT, and we say from for company named Fortinet, extracts all of its locations, partners, key executives, products, product descriptions, and product features. And so that is we're using GPT for what it's good for, which is understanding language.
Okay, so how much time do we have? Do we have 5 minutes?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is fun.
Okay. All right. I know. I just okay, I'm going to totally nerd out here, but you're my hero. I because I'm an industry junkie, and we talked once, and I asked you, how do you become an industry analyst? And he said, first he said, read my book. So Up and to the Right, I read Up and to the Right, and I read Curmudgeon. Good. And I've been trying to, I have my own way of doing it, but I'm an industry junkie. I wouldn't call myself an industry analyst, and I don't want to dilute the profession, but I look up to you. So anyways, I just had to nerd out there for a second. So we talked about the trend of AI. So AI's maybe not as hyped as it's purported to be, but it's probably a giant. So, it's kind of eats itself in that way. Yep. Anything else? So let's talk maybe about risk a little bit. So is risk truly one of those areas that we're going to see sort of a peel back where organizations are not going to seek to quantify cybersecurity risk as much as they've been doing? Where's the market going there?
Wow, interesting question. I haven't seen any signs at all of the market backing off of risk. I've been trying to get it to do that for 20 years. I think risk is immeasurable, unquantifiable, and meaningless. So you shouldn't do it, right? You shouldn't. You should just, if anything relies on risk for your calculations of what you're doing, you shouldn't be spending money on it. You should be spending money on stopping threats, right? You should identify threats. The closer you can, or the more in advance you can identify them, the better. Some people say, well, that's risk, isn't it? Well, no. If it's a threat when if you're a casino operator in Vegas today, right? You always had the threat of ransomware and people attacking you and all the rest. But today, you've got the threat is much more real, right? The threat actors are going to move from MGM to Caesars to everybody because it's paying off for them. And I call that a threat-based approach to security. It's
sure, and that's not the same as risk.
It's not the same as risk at all. So my best model is look at the President of the United States. Usually has a daily briefing from the national security community, led by the National Security Council. And when they get in a room with him, they do not talk to him about risks. They don't come in and say, "Oh, we've done a complete scan of all of our bases, 256 military bases around the world, plus the 270 embassies, and we found 14 embassies that had backdoors without cameras, and a whole bunch of military bases where the trees had overgrown the fence line so people could climb over." That's risk management, right? That would be, hey, we've got this many vulnerabilities and these are riskier than the other ones, so we got to do something about it. No, what the briefing starts with is, hey, Al Qaeda in the Middle East is doing this, and this threat actor group is doing that, and they're chatting about possibly doing this in the future. That's the threat-based briefing and actions that the president makes decisions based on. That's what we should be doing for our own IT systems.
So you're saying the next buzzword is threat.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't call it a buzzword, because I think you're absolutely right in that it is probably the best way to look at problems from a security standpoint.
Yeah. It's just like it's hard to get away from military metaphors. That's, we talk about cyber warfare, and we like to think that people in our SOC are like a, platoon battling against adversaries. And maybe it is a little bit like that. And once again, that's, when you're in the battlefield, nobody's sitting there calculating risks, right? It's, when you make a difficult decision, the decision maker is balancing their intuition with knowledge that they have and all the rest. But better to have the spy agency tell you what the adversary's intent is based on data than it is to flip a coin.
So if we were to go with, I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit, because I feel like risk is just this. I mean, cybersecurity is already nebulous and philosophical, and risk takes it to another level. Yeah. And so to make sense of it, is it safe to define risk as the likelihood and the probability, and probably how much you're going to lose if it's realized, the likelihood of it happening, the probability of it happening, and how much it will cost if this risk were realized? Is that fair?
That's fair. And the trouble is, nobody with all those models, if you look at FAIR models, etc., and then you look at some of the biggest cyber attacks in history, the costs far outweighed anything that was ever estimated, right? The cost for a lot of cyber attacks is the entire value of the organization, right? The market cap, because the stock could go to zero. salaries of all the employees because the company could go out of business. Those are the existential risks, and you can't, those are not scorable because they're quantum states of, nothing's going bad or everything went bad at once. And it's, I'm influenced by Nassim Taleb's books on risk because he takes the same approach I do towards markets, and he criticizes the concept of risk management and stock trading, right? And it's, and he uses the metaphor for the turkey, right? It's if you went on what happened for the last 6 weeks, every single day, turkey wakes up and he gets fed and wanders around and he goes to sleep, and that's great. But the day before Thanksgiving is different than that, and the turkey could not have predicted it from what went before.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's yeah. So the turkey can, if the turkey was looking at risk the way we were, I'm going to get off on a tangent on this turkey thing because it's great. The turkey doesn't know that the likelihood is 100%, I guess.
Yep.
The probability is, well, so it'll happen 1 year out of the year, 1 day out of the year, you're
Right.
going to die.
Yep.
So, but the impact is severe.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. So turkeys don't do risk management. If they did, maybe they'd know that.
Yep.
But certain things don't change. Car accidents, roughly when people die, those things are very...
Car accidents do change, right? During COVID, they dropped dramatically because we stopped commuting
and I
to
guess
work.
nobody...
We showed the
That's
real
true.
cost of commuting and working in the office is,
Right.
I haven't seen the numbers
Right.
lag, so I haven't seen the numbers
Yeah.
yet, but yeah.
Wow. Yeah, just going to work, just getting up and getting in your car and going to work is a huge risk. Well,
Yeah.
I guess your insurance does calculate. They do ask, how many days a week do you commute? So they know that.
Right. They take that into account. Yeah. And you can
Right.
do that with things that respond to statistics. So
Sure.
weather and accident and, trees falling over. Those are, if you have enough instances, then it can be statistically analyzed. It's a little harder to statistically analyze threat actors because that's more of an economic thing. It's more of a market, right? Because like a stock market, you've got very, very, very smart people trying to figure out how to steal their next $1 million and innovating and developing on it. And that's, Wall Street has yet to figure out how to predict that.
Yeah, that's a crazy model if you think about it. I mean, I have friends who trade stocks and futures and, Forex and all that.
Yep.
And they can swear up and down. They're like, I'm not gambling. Like, I know how to predict the risk. I know what I'm getting. I'm like, dude, you're delusional.
Yeah.
That's the same thing we're doing in cyber.
Yeah, when you gamble, you can limit your risk by limiting your exposure, right? I always think, hey, look, I can calculate probabilities at the craps table. That's my game.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so at any one time, if a 7 rolls after the game's been going for a while, I'm at risk of losing all the money I got out on the table, except the money on the come line, which I get back. It's easy to quantify. And that's, to me, that's risk. And you can't do anything like that with, when humans are involved in making decisions about whether they attack you or somebody else.
Right. There's this tool called It's Safe that a buddy of mine invented. I don't think it's even on your radar yet.
No, I don't think so.
It's Safe. Yep. It's their approach to risk reduction is very interesting. The philosophy is if you reduce the company's footprint on the internet, then you reduce the risk of an attack. So it's primarily a threat mitigation tool.
Yep.
It's a proactive threat mitigation tool.
So attack surface management kind of thing?
Nope. So it's not Chasm. It's not any kind of attack surface, anything. So it is the closest that it would come to is probably an IPS, with the exception that it mitigates any kind of threats that it detects. So if you've got malware in the system that is tied to an IP address that's anomalous, it will block it, right? So that way, what they do is they basically reduce, the footprint of the company on the internet, because it detects basically where it's not supposed to be, what
Right.
it's not supposed to ping, and it closes that circle to a more
Okay.
manageable, therefore just like taking a big chunk out of any risks that would apply to intrusion or
Sure.
detection.
Sure.
Really cool stuff, really cool
Yeah.
tech.
Very cool.
Yeah. And that's maybe that's the future of risk. Maybe that's the future of, if you can't quantify it and it's really fuzzy and it bounces everywhere, just limit your risk, or limit your internet footprint.
Yeah.
Just limit how. Yeah. Anyways, all right. Well, Richard, I appreciate your time, and you're always gracious enough to spend some time with me and let me, sort of just shoot the breeze on this industry stuff. But
Yeah, I love
I'm
it.
always happy when you stop by.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you. And everybody, thank you for watching this episode of Security Market Watch. And Richard, where can people find you?
Yeah, look me up on LinkedIn. My website is ITHarvest.com. And that's where you get the book and get access to the dashboard as well.
So everybody, if you want to cut through the noise of cybersecurity, if you're trying to buy cybersecurity solutions, first, watch Security Market Watch, then get ITHarvest, and by all means, pick up Richard's book, Security Yearbook 2003. It's going to be out. What's the launch date? What's the official?
2023 was launched right before Black Hat. So it was, the actual launch was at Black Hat. So it's out.
I'm confused. I went to your website. And it said I can pre-order it.
No, that's my fault. My fault.
Oh, well, okay. So anybody, if the website says that you can pre-order, you don't have to listen to the website. You can just order it, and you should. All right.
There you
Thanks,
go.
everybody.